Hey, freedom lovers, it's William Moore. You are watching Beyond the Ties That Bind. Thanks for joining me for this episode. And I hope each and every one of you are having as good of a day as you can possibly have, living under the shadow of tyranny and oppression which the government has now cast across the country. Every day we're exposed to some new tyranny, some new Orwellian type of law which will keep us that much more under the thumb of the government, in their grasp, under their control. However, in this episode, I want to talk about a constitutional crisis. We are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. And that crisis is freedom lovers everywhere using the word Constitution are referring to the Constitution in the same breath that they use the word freedom. Freedom and the Constitution cannot coexist because the Constitution created a strong central government which now oversees the Constitution. So the Constitution is a government document, a controlling document, an enslaving document, a document meant to enslave the people. It does not restrict the power of the federal government and protect individual freedom. No, it's the opposite. It restricts individual freedom and protects the power of a strong central government. It was drafted in 1787 by a group of attorneys and bankers and land speculators. Today, if Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Chucky Schumer, Mitch McConnell all got together behind closed doors and then came out with the document and said, this document will now govern the country, nobody today would accept it. If we go back to 1787, when they came out of Philadelphia and said, we have a document that's going to govern the country, no one back then accepted it either. It was ratified through deceit. It is a document which enslaves people. It is not a freedom document. Not a freedom document at all. As for the text of the Constitution, if it was intended to limit the federal government, it surely doesn't say so. If we go to Article 1, Section 8, that's a catalog of congressional power and the longest and most detailed in the Constitution. Let's go on down. Let's peruse on down to Article 1, Section 8. Here we go. And right at the beginning, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. Now, how is that a freedom document? It has the power to make you a slave. Because if a body of men or a group of men has the power to tax you, take from you that which is yours, that's not a freedom document. So quit referring to this Constitution like it's a freedom document or protects freedom or protects the individual, because it does not. It is a document. It is a tyrannical document. It is a document which created a despotic government, a government which wants to control you. Then if we go down to Clause 15, to provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union. What are those laws? Maybe the power to lay and collect taxes? So they can raise up a militia to collect taxes. Then how is this a freedom document? It's not. It shouldn't be even mentioned in the same breath as the word freedom. Now, going back down to Clause 15, to provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Now, when we're talking about both enemies, foreign and domestic, foreign would be repelling invasions. Domestic would be to suppress insurrections. Now, at the time that the Constitution was drafted, they were talking about Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shay in Massachusetts. It was a tax revolt. That's why they put this in there, to suppress insurrections. They want to suppress any type of tax revolt, any type of rebellion, any type of secession, any type of maybe a protest gone wrong. They want to be able to call forth the militia or the army, the National Guard, to suppress the insurrection. So when you have a person and they are making an oath, and in that oath they state that they're going to defend the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic, the original intent was to defend the Constitution from enemies foreign, like Great Britain, France, Spain, or domestic, people like Daniel Shea. So when you have a jackbooted thug that's got his boot on the throat of an individual, he is defending the Constitution from a domestic enemy. Because see, any legislature can scribble down a law on a piece of paper. And if any individual breaks that law, which the legislature scribbled down on a piece of paper, then they can have their army, their law enforcement, come out and put their boot on the throat of that individual because they are defending the Constitution from what they consider a domestic enemy. So we're not talking, constitutional law and natural law, two different laws. Constitution was not drafted to protect natural law, not drafted to protect individual freedoms. So people need to know what they're talking about when they're talking about the Constitution, because the Constitution is not a freedom document. I'm sorry, but it pisses me off. I love each and every one of you out there, but I love you in the truth, because if I didn't love you in the truth, I don't love you at all. Quit using the Constitution in the same breath as freedom, as the word freedom. Because freedom and the Constitution cannot coexist. Cannot coexist at all. So, you had the Constitution. It was drafted 1787. And a group of men get together. Bankers, lawyers, land speculators, like I stated. If you had Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett come out and say, hey, we have a document that's going to govern the country, people would say, what? No, we're not going to go for that, especially since it was done in secrecy. Just like Constitution was. It was drafted in secrecy in order to give a certain group of men power over other individuals. People talk about limited government, say that the Constitution was drafted so that we could limit government. Really? It created a behemoth which has the power of unlimited taxation. So how can you talk about a limited government and a government that has the power of unlimited taxation? At the same time. It's contrary. Or as Madeline Kahn in Blazing Saddles would say, it's contrary. So, anyway, sorry, I just had to have a little humor there. We have a necessary and proper clause in the Constitution, and that is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 of the Constitution. It says, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Foregoing powers? Well, what would those foregoing powers be? Maybe the power to lay and collect taxes? Maybe the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union? Execute the laws of the Union. Suppress insurrections and repel invasions? See, when it says here to provide for calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, that's coercion. That's through threat of force. How is that a freedom document? It's not a freedom document. And when we talk about unconstitutional, and we say that, oh my goodness, if the federal government was to force people to have a vaccination, that's unconstitutional. No, it's not. Because right here, in this clause, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. And then you go back up here and you have the general welfare clause. Well, general welfare is in reference to the health of the citizens in the nation. And if you're a citizen, that means you're a subject, you're a slave. Now, a lot of people will talk about the framers as some great guys, and they want to act like the framers of the Constitution were out to protect freedom, and they were not. I mean, George Washington, remember that guy? Father, I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. Well, that was BS there. That never happened. But anyway, he writes a letter of transmittal. This goes out. This is before the Bill of Rights ever came into existence in 1789. But this letter goes out with the Constitution to all the state ratifying conventions. And in this letter, it says, it is obviously impracticable in the federal government of these states to secure all the rights of independent sovereignty to each, and yet provide for the interest and safety of all. There's that safety again. You know, everything is about safety. Give up your rights for safety. Give up your freedoms for security. They were, you know, pushing the same rhetoric back then. It states that individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. The magnitude of the sacrifice must depend as well on situation and circumstance as on the object to be obtained. What was the object to be obtained? A strong central government which had the power of unlimited taxation could raise up an army at any time to collect those taxes and suppress any insurrection, meaning revolt, rebellion, protest gone a little bit, wrong. He goes on. This is where it gets interesting. It is at all times difficult to draw with precision the line between those rights which must be surrendered. Now, do I need to go to the dictionary and look up this word for people? Surrendered. And those which may be preserved. And on the present occasion, this difficulty was increased by a difference among the several states as to their situation, extent, habits, and particular interest. I am not upset with the people who watch this. There are a few people who watch this that still try and, in the same breath use the word freedom in reference to the Constitution. That's what I want to get people to eliminate, because I want to show that the Constitution is not a freedom document. I love each and every one of you out there. As I stated, I love you all, but I must love you in truth. If I don't love you in truth, then I don't love you at all. Then me saying that I love you, that's just words. But if I'm honest and brave enough to tell you the truth, then you can bet your bottom dollar I love you. So, this letter of transmittal right here, he says that it is obviously impracticable in the federal government of these states to secure all rights of independent sovereignty to each, and yet provide for the interest and safety of all. Doesn't that sound like you're trading freedom for safety? And people will say, but what about Benjamin Franklin? Didn't he have that quote? Wasn't he at the Constitutional Convention? And doesn't he have that quote about, exchanging freedom or liberty for safety, and that if you're going to do so, you deserve neither liberty nor safety. Well, we need to take that quote in context, in its proper context. Because if it's not taken in context, it means nothing. Yes, Benjamin Franklin was at the Constitutional Convention. He signed the document. And this is what he had to say, though, about liberty and safety. Very few people who quote these words, however, have any idea where they come from or what Franklin was really saying when he wrote them. Despite its many, many variations, this is the actual quote. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. According to White's, the words appear in a letter widely presumed to be written by Franklin in 1755, before the Constitutional Convention, on behalf of the Pennsylvania Assembly to the colonial governor. The letter was a salvo in a power struggle between the governor and the Assembly over funding of security on the frontier, one in which the Assembly wished to tax the lands of the Penn family, he explains. The letter wasn't about liberty, but about taxes and the ability to raise money for defense against French and Indian attacks. The governor kept vetoing the Assembly's efforts at the behest of the family which had appointed him. Indeed, if you look at the text surrounding the famous quote, it's pretty clearly about money. So the quote's about money. Our assemblies have of late had so many supply bill and of such different kinds rejected on various pretenses, wrote Franklin. There's not much on liberty, as we understand the concept in the entire letter. So, yes, he was there, and his quote is not contradicting what Washington said here, because it's about a completely different subject. So if we go down to the amendments, those pesky amendments that people like to quote and say protects freedom. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Now, there was a brouhaha taking place, and you had men like Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, George Mason, Samuel Adams, who were against the Constitution. Now, if you go to Patrick Henry's speech to the ratifying convention in Virginia, look that speech up. I read it at least once every 6 months. Read that speech. It is the most passionate defense of freedom that there is, most passionate defense of individual freedom. It does get into state freedom, but it's the most passionate defense of individual freedom, and he was against the Constitution. Why would he make such a passionate defense of individual freedom and be against the Constitution at the same time? You need to ask yourself that question. So, he and others wanted to pretty much reject the Constitution, and so there was some dealings going on, and a lot of amendments were proposed. One amendment in particular gave the states quite a bit of power, and that's Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, and there's a lot of powers delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And when it talks about people, it's talking about body politic, not individual people. So you have these amendments, and in George Washington's inaugural speech, he warned that the amendments must not weaken the power of the national government. And so you had all of these state conventions going on, a lot of meetings going on, and there were 210 amendments which were proposed by the states, which threatened central power. So James Madison, now James Madison was not the father of the Constitution. He did not write the articles, sections, clauses. That was George Clymer. But James Madison, he jumps into action. And he quickly acted and drafted a Bill of Rights which would not endanger any part of the Constitution. So he made sure the amendments were not contrary to the Constitution, the articles, sections, and clauses. He made sure that they were in line and did not threaten the power of the central government. His goal was to head off any drive for structural reform and avoid a second constitutional convention, because, bet your bottom dollar, if Patrick Henry showed up at that second constitutional convention, the Constitution would be scrapped. He was a power to be reckoned with. Now, people like to quote Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Give me freedom or give me death. Liberty's another story. But give me liberty or give me death. They love to quote Patrick Henry. But it seems that they leave off there and don't look at his passionate defense of freedom. The speech that he gave against the adoption of the Constitution. So, you had these 210 amendments. They were proposed by the states. They threatened the central power of the federal government. So Madison quickly acted and drafted a Bill of Rights which would not endanger any part of the Constitution. So he takes 210 amendments, whittles it down to 12. 2 weren't ratified, so then you had 10. And the goal was to head off any drive for structural reform of the Constitution. And that's what he did. Now, I highly recommend getting this book, Conceived in Liberty, by Murray J. Rothbard, or Murray N. Rothbard. Conceived in Liberty, this is the 5th volume, The New Republic, 1784 to 1791. I guarantee you'll love this so much that you'll run out and grab volumes 1 through 4. This is only $15. Now, volumes 1 through 4 are about 4 times the size for $29.99. It is an awesome investment. If you love to read, it's a great read. I mean, it just takes you back to that time. I mean, I love that book. Anyway, now, I'm going to read the back cover of the book, and you're going to see what was going on back at the time. It was a bloodless coup d'etat against an unresisting Confederation Congress. The original structure of the new Constitution was now complete. The Federalists, by use of propaganda, chicanery, fraud, malapportionment of delegates, blackmail, threats of secession, and even coercive laws, threat of force, had managed to sustain enough delegates to defy the wishes of the majority of the American people and create a new constitution. They defied the majority of the American people and created a new constitution. The drive was managed by a core of brilliant members and representatives of the financial and landed oligarchy. These wealthy merchants and large landowners were joined by the urban artisans of the large cities in their drive to create a strong, overriding central government, a supreme government with its own absolute power to tax, regulate commerce, and raise armies. These powers were sought eagerly as a method of handing out special privileges to commercial groups, navigation acts to subsidize shipping, tariffs, and protect inefficient artisans stampeded by national depression from foreign manufactured goods, and a strong army and navy. But government, by its nature, cannot supply bounties and privileges without taking them from others, and these others were to be largely the hapless bulk of the nation's individuals. He says citizens, I say individuals. Citizen means you're a subject. We're not subject. We're individuals. Well, we're prisoners to this central government, which was created by the Constitution, which everybody seems to think is a freedom document. It's a document of enslavement. So we have a constitutional crisis. That constitutional crisis is freedom lovers referencing the Constitution. Constitution is a worthless piece of trash when it comes to freedom. Oh, it's not worthless when it gives a group of psychopaths power over individuals. No, it has great worth then. But as far as freedom, it's a worthless piece of trash. It's not even good enough to wipe your ass with. I hate that document because that document created the the tyrannical government which now runs roughshod over all of us. Anyway, pick up this book. Also, John Taylor has a book, and that book is Tyranny Unmasked. Tyranny Unmasked. And this is a voice from back in that time period. So, you have these merchants and landowners, these attorneys and bankers who birthed this Constitution. It was conceived in slavery. It was birthed in deceit. It's like Hitler and Lady Gaga having a baby. And, you know, the product thereof is not going to be very good. So, attorneys and bankers getting together. Think about that, people. You think attorneys and bankers are going to be, you know, worried about anything other than their own interest? No, they're not. Come on. So, get these books. Conceived in Liberty, right there by Murray and Rothbard. And also John Taylor's Tyranny Unmasked. Also, I highly recommend No Treason by Lysander Spooner. And once you read those books, you are going to want to run on over to my store while it's still up and get your, one of my favorite shirts at least, Prostitution in the Constitution. One voluntarily takes your money and screws you. The other does it by force. Need I tell you which one does it by force? Everyone, have a great weekend. This is William Moore for Beyond the Ties That Bind. I love each and every one of you. I love you in truth. If I was lying to you, I wouldn't love you at all. Until next time, my friends, peace.